Scared for Reals.
Hey, it's Chris O'Neill.
Adam Perry.
Welcome to Scared for Reals. What is a horror movie? We're going to banter back and forth, but we actually have a very special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, this is Aaron Lambert.
Brother!
Brother. Adam Perry's brother.
Aaron, you're a filmmaker, and we'll talk at some point when your film is ready. But according to the Internet Dictionary, horror is a genre of literature, film, and television that is meant to scare, startle, shock, and even repulse audiences. The key focus of a horror novel, horror film, or horror TV show is to elicit a sense of dread. But since Aaron is our special guest, we're going to start with you. When it comes to horror movies, what's like one or two that come to mind?
I mean, you'd have to go Exorcist, probably regarded as one of the greatest, if not the greatest horror movies of all time. The original Halloween. Definitely comes to mind. But then there's so many subgenres. So now you're talking, what is
Slasher movie.
Slasher, supernatural horror, psychological
Folklore.
horror. Yeah, absolutely. Classic horror. You got your Frankensteins, Draculas, gothic horror, anything.
But there's a lot of different people coming out now saying like Eyes Wide Shut is a horror movie. I argue that Fanny and Alexander is a horror movie. And again, I'm going by the definition of dread, some cases disgust, horrifying, movies that stick in your mind. You may have nightmares because of it. That's, to me, is a true horror movie, is one that definitely horrifies, definitely gives you a sense of dread.
I mean, you're definitely not wrong, but that's such a broad way to look at it. Because if that's the case, it's like, so any movie that was unsettling or scared you or maybe gave you nightmares. Growing up as a kid, I would have to say Brave Little Toaster's a horror movie because that clown scene definitely messed me up.
My boss is afraid of clowns. He's not afraid of Halloween or anything like that. But when it comes to clowns, he is horrified.
Oh, absolutely.
All art, I guess, it's subjective.
Exactly. So, I mean, just because it scared you, does that necessarily make it a horror movie? I would say no. It's just
discussion is over. We're done.
Because if that was the case, then anything could be a horror movie.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Anything can be a horror movie.
Okay.
You disagree.
But is it?
I think so. If I think so, to me it is. That's just my opinion, right?
Well, how about we take a movie at a time and...
Okay.
All right, so let's take Silence.
Let's go to Aaron first, because Aaron is our guest. Guest first.
Okay. So just throw a movie out there and be like, is it a horror movie?
Yeah, a movie that you think is a horror movie that maybe not so to someone else.
Okay. Stepford Wives.
Stepford Wives, that's an interesting one. One that is classified as kind of like a sci-fi dystopian kind of film. So why do you think Stepford Wives is a horror movie?
Well, I mean, I'm talking about the 75 original. I'm not talking about
I know.
Just to clarify that, I mean, the 2004 cartoon. Well, I mean, just to kind of, summarize it and stuff like that, the movie plays like a terrible nightmare. You can almost say it's almost Twilight Zone-esque, this idea that you go to this community and the person, your partner, the one you're supposed to love the most, would do something so horrific to you as to kill you and then replace you with a robotic replica. Like that's a nightmare in and of itself. Right. I know a lot of people look at it more of like it's a thriller, or even you said kind of like a sci-fi thing because it has to do with robots and stuff like that. I go, but the story itself is terrifying. Horrifying concept.
I've not seen that version, unfortunately.
Oh, man.
So I'm in the dark, and it's one I've been wanting to see.
And it's one of the few movies that doesn't have a happy ending. Not to spoil it for anybody, it's 50 years, but the men win. They replace their wives with robots. Even our final girl, she loses.
Catherine Ross.
Yep, absolutely.
Stepford Wives is never discussed as a horror film, but you bring up a lot of good points. Again, I haven't seen it, and I probably would have agreed with you, because when I have a sense of dread, when I'm actually startled, a nightmare it's name of several Hammer horror films. There's Nightmare, a lot of those Hammer horror films.
Absolutely.
Adam, what's a controversial horror movie in your opinion that others may not think is a horror movie?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's controversial, but it's definitely debated. Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, and to me, that's more horrifying than Halloween.
I mean,
I'm not comparing the quality of the film. I'm just talking about as far as like shocking, horrifying. Silence of the Lambs to me, is 1,000 times more horrifying than Halloween is. That's just my opinion.
It ticks all the check marks for a horror movie.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, not only do you have one, but you have two iconic serial killers in Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill, kidnapping and killing and maiming and all the blood and all the gore, but yet it's heavily debated that it's a psychological thriller and not a horror movie. What do you guys think? I think it's a horror movie.
I think it's a horror movie, too. To me, it was what you don't see. And like you said, gore, you don't really see the people dying. You see either the aftermath, you see maybe a little blood splurt on the face. Your imagination is more gory than anything that's ever put on the screen. And that, to me, is what makes it... Yes. To me, it's more horrifying what you don't see.
No filmmaker or director will ever be able to recreate the horrible things that's inside your mind.
Right.
You know what I mean? In terms of Silence of the Lamb being a horror movie, I kind of skirt the line a little bit on that one. It could be, but it is also more to me of a psychological thriller because it's about the unresolved issues of like Clarice and stuff like that and her past and how she's looked at as her peers and stuff like that. It's not really about, it's really not about like Buffalo Bill or even Hannibal Lecter. It's her story. And stuff like that. It's about her.
And you make a good point. It shows it without a word being spoken. She gets into the elevator and the guys tower over her. Literally tower over her.
For any of those out there who remember what video stores are, you could always play you could always do the video store test, which is, okay, if I'm going to Blockbuster, where am I going to find this movie? You would never find Silence of the Lamb in horror. You'd find it in drama.
I know, and that's the thing. To me, it is a horror film, and it's okay to label it as a horror film. It's just like for some reason, horror movies are looked down upon. I always thought this about the film industry. Horror movies are looked down upon. So Silence of the Lambs, like you said, it could skirt. It could be a couple different genres mixed together. I can go with that. It may be a thriller and a horror movie, but it's like, it's a horror movie. The only one that's had any prestige is The Exorcist.
Right.
You know, Psycho kind of flirted with it.
But again, The Exorcist is another one that's highly debated. Is it a horror movie?
See, I never heard that debate.
Horror chat rooms in the horror community.
The internet.
The internet, the all-powerful internet.
The keyboard warriors.
But again, I mean, even if you ask... listen to interviews with Blatty and Friedkin.
Yeah, Friedkin, I do remember Friedkin saying
that it was not a horror movie.
No.
Adamant.
His whole thing, it was a classic good versus evil story.
Yeah.
And I agree with that too. But to me, I was petrified. The dream sequence was... it wasn't as horrifying as an Ingmar Bergman dream sequence by any means, but it was still, there's a lot of dread. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of, to me, horrifying sequences.
Oh, sure.
How a child be possessed like that. To me, that was what was horrifying.
Exorcist, not only is it a horror movie, but it's probably the most successful horror movie ever made. It is. It's the
only one that's actually won legit Oscars and all that kind of stuff. If we use Oscars as the creme of the creme,
right?
To me, it's lost a lot of luster over that.
Absolutely.
Then again, another one that I've seen brought up, Shape of Water.
Shape of Water. No, I don't think that's a horror movie.
No,
I don't think so either. But it's debated because you got the Gill-Man creature.
But that's more, again, it's not really the Gill-Man story. It's her story.
Yeah,
right? It's definitely a fantasy. I would definitely say fairy tale.
It's definitely more of a fantasy.
Fairy tale.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a fairy tale. It's a love story between
woman and fish.
Exactly. How broad are we talking about it? Because just because there's a monster in it or a creature in it, does that make it a horror movie? Well, no. At least in my opinion.
Right. Well, I'm going to go way off the beaten path because I saw Killers of the Flower Moon 4 times in the theater, and I've seen a lot of the contemporary horror films like Smile, the X trilogy by Ty West.
Yeah, the Ty West stuff. Yep.
Killers of the Flower Moon to me is more disturbing, more horrifying. There's more dread. I'm more frightened after watching that movie. Smile, there was a lot of stuff about post-traumatic stress in it, which was really good, but I wasn't scared. Right. I wasn't like horrified. When I was watching Killers of the Flower Moon, you hear gasps in the audience. You hear them. It was like on cue. I haven't seen a movie like that in almost a decade where people were gasping and silent watching a movie.
Right. It very well could be considered that. And I know people would probably like be kind of film snobs and say like, oh, Scorsese would never make a horror movie and stuff like that.
Oh, Shutter Island.
I was about to say, but he also made Shutter Island.
And Cape Fear could be...
Cape Fear, love Cape Fear.
Cape Fear could be construed construed as a horror movie, even though it's psychological thriller.
And it is, exactly.
It is, but it's also a horror movie. I mean, a guy biting the face of a woman, violent horror movie stuff.
Especially the original Cape Fear. I feel like it's under the same category as the original Psycho.
Right. Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, a psychotic.
Yeah.
That kills people. Mm-hmm. In this case, he rapes them too. That's like one up on Psycho.
Yeah, he's brutalizing and terrorizing a family the entire movie. So
yeah, I think Killers of the Flower Moon is a horror movie. You guys haven't seen it yet.
No.
The running time has people so intimidated. 3.5 hours of almost nonstop brutality.
Wow.
Have you guys read anything about the Osage Native American massacres?
I vaguely.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that was touched upon. We didn't really learn about in school, but when you look at, Native American massacres, that's on the list. And yeah, there was a few of them that were beaten to death. They were shot and killed. A lot of them were poisoned. They were poisoned slowly. The Osage people happened to be on a place that oil was prominent, so they benefited from it. They had tons of money. They were taken advantage of. A lot of white guys would marry into the relationship so they could kill off their spouses and inherit all the money. I'm doing a spoiler here. It's true, and De Niro it's probably one of his, if it's not his most evil performance, it's up there because he does it with a smile and he puts on a facade. And everyone thinks of him as his friend, but he's actually slowly killing the whole Osage community.
I mean, De Niro is talking back to Cape Fear and stuff like that.
Cape Fear, you could see him being psychotic. You could see it. Killers of the Flower Moon, he's very subtle. You only see it behind closed doors.
Yeah, well, my point is, like, if he wanted to be terrifying, oh boy, he could turn it on and be absolutely terrifying. I'm not qualifying like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein because that was,
Yeah, Kenneth Branagh. Hit or miss with him.
It really is with him.
Yeah, we talked about that in our Frankenstein episode. De Niro was great. Wish there was someone else at the helm.
Yeah.
Like Coppola wanted to do that movie, but he couldn't. And then when all hell broke loose with the finance and everything like that, he's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, Kenneth Branagh, I mean, I've been hearing talks that he's going to take on Gargoyles, the Disney property, and make it a live action, either streaming series or a movie, and I just keep telling people, get ready to be bored. I mean, he'll have a few tentpole moments, I'm sure, but he likes shooting scenery. He likes shooting people talking.
And he did very well with Henry V.
Sure.
I thought he did a fabulous job. The cast was hit or miss with Hamlet. Belfast, I thought, was really a great movie. It was probably his most personal film. But other than that, it's like he said there's no such thing as overacting.
Right.
And he's done that so many times.
Proved that with Wild Wild West.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I think Killers of the Flower Moon is a horror movie. That's just the way I see it because of the way I felt. And that movie has not left my mind. Of course, spending 16 hours with the film, watching it 4 times. It's such a disturbing movie, and it's done so beautifully that you want to see it again because you may miss some of the stuff the first or second time around.
Aaron, do you have another one?
I'll tell you what, I'll throw one out there that I don't consider it a horror movie, and I'm tired of people lumping it in, and that's Jaws.
Why are you arguing against Jaws as a horror movie?
I mean, does it have terrifying moments? Of course. It was responsible for the
summer blockbuster.
It was definitely responsible for it was like the first summer blockbuster. But it's definitely responsible for a lot of people's aquaphobia. Still won't go into the water, or at least open water like the ocean, because of that movie 50 years ago almost. And yes, I know it has some horrifying moments with the Kinter boy and all this other stuff. It's an adventure movie akin to, say, like a Moby Dick. I mean, I know I've heard Spielberg categorize it as a monster movie, but even still, I wouldn't call it that because it's a shark. It's a
really big shark.
Yeah, it's a really big shark, but it's not a vampire. It's not a werewolf. It's a creature of the ocean.
I can see why, though, that people would argue for it being a horror movie because let's use The Birds. To me, Jaws is similar to The Birds in a way. Nature gone wrong.
Yeah.
Why did it go wrong? We don't know. We don't care, but it happened, and we got to fix this problem.
See, there you go. I don't consider The Birds a horror movie either.
I would say more of a sci-fi...
ecological thriller kind of thing.
It's a suspense movie.
Yeah.
I could see, if there was anyone else that directed Jaws, I could see a young Henry Georges Clouzot or Alfred Hitchcock directing it.
Yeah.
Those two guys directed suspense better than anyone, and it seemed like they were kind of trying to outdo each other. Like if you ever watch Wages of Fear, Have you seen that one?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like
Yep.
that movie is a nail biter, diabolique. You're just like the tension.
Yeah, and it just keeps building.
Yes, and builds and builds and builds. And same with Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
To me, Jaws, I felt the same way. It's like, oh my God, how is this going to end?
First time watching it, if your heart doesn't start beating every time you hear that theme
Right.
or see the barrels on the surface of the water, which was actually them trying to solve a technical problem because the shark never worked.
I love how it was such a low budget movie. No one realizes it, and it played to its advantages. And that's what made it so great. You
Yeah.
didn't really see the shark that much.
Yeah, the yellow barrels kept the shark there because the thing never
Right.
worked. But it made it more suspenseful.
Right, and
'cause you
your
couldn't see it.
imagination, just like Silence of the Lambs,
Yeah.
makes it more horrifying than what it is. So I can see people arguing for it being a horror movie. So Adam, you disagree?
I don't disagree in the sense that, but again, if I'm putting,
Don't hold back, man.
no. I'm just saying if I'm putting your logic to it, can you not argue that Jaws did fill people with dread and make them terrified?
That's why I
to
said
go?
I can see why. I can see why people call it a horror movie. I personally wasn't horrified by it.
This is a very subjective
Yes,
conversation. So I'm just saying, so I think it skirts on the edge of horror a little bit more than I think you guys think it does, because I do believe the book was intended to be a horror.
The book
horror
was
novel.
The
Am I
book was a
correct?
mess. The book
Yeah.
was
I
kind of a
understand.
mess.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but
the book.
I love how Spielberg cleaned it up because it was like the Richard Dreyfuss character has an affair with his.
Yeah.
It's like that made no sense.
There's gangsters in it.
they're gangsters. Yeah,
there's
that's right.
drug dealings, and it's a weird one.
Yeah, it was kind of all over the place.
Very
Spielberg,
racist and homophobic.
Yeah.
The book is a mess. Yeah, like you said, a mess.
And I love how Spielberg just focused in on the shark. We have to get the shark. And Brody has a lot of fears. So it's all from his point of view, and he has to conquer his fears.
Right.
And that's what I like, because he's afraid of the water. He moved away from New York City because he was afraid of all the stuff that was going on there. So he's constantly afraid.
Right.
And in the end, he has to face Jaws on his own, by himself.
Exactly.
And he conquers it, and man, it's like 1,000 pounds literally off his chest.
Yeah.
Really?
That's what I loved about it. Spielberg made it overcoming your fears, facing your fears. That's what I love it. That's what it boils down to. Again, I can see how people can construe it as a horror movie.
Would you call Jurassic Park a horror movie?
I know some people could argue that.
Because to me, I would say it'd have to be the same thing. Okay, if you consider Jaws a horror movie, then Jurassic, because it's literally the same movie, except instead of sharks, it's dinosaurs.
I agree. If
Yeah.
you're going to call Jaws a horror movie, you're going to call Silence of the Lambs a horror movie, you got to call Jurassic Park a horror movie.
Which I would not. I
wouldn't either,
Yeah.
because I would loop it in as Godzilla.
Yeah.
Godzilla, again, well, the first Japanese version of Godzilla, which I know Adam hasn't seen. I think you have the Japanese,
The original.
speaking.
Yeah,
Yes.
without Raymond Burr, yes.
Yeah, that one is more disturbing, but it's not horrifying. But Jurassic Park, I don't consider it horrifying either. I put it on Godzilla kind of level, because again, nature gone wacky,
Right.
and instead of nuclear, it's man and capturing animals all the time and using them for themselves and their own means, So there's that message, but it's nature gone wacky.
Right. I mean, but at least with Godzilla, you can at least argue that unlike Jurassic Park, where Jurassic Park is just a adventure, thriller, fantasy, I mean, yeah, I guess, they are playing with the fears of, man trying to emulate God and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to allude to as well. But yes.
By bringing back dinosaurs after millions of years of extinction. The original Godzilla at least was making commentary on people's paranoia of the atomic age.
Right.
So that I would consider a little bit more of a horror movie, because of that's what its basis is in, what I mean?
See, I'm not talking about that one in particular. I would say like Jurassic Park is like every other Godzilla movie afterwards. It's kind of there is a lot of tongue in cheek in Jurassic Park, a lot of it.
Oh yeah.
And even though there's satire in all of the Godzilla and all of the Jurassic Park movies, I would put Jurassic Park on level as King Kong versus Godzilla. Again,
Okay.
there are some campiness, there is some tongue-in-cheek stuff, but there is messages in both of those movies.
All right, then let me ask the two of you this. I mean, can we agree that movies like Jaws, Jurassic Park, Shape of Water, even, they got the monsters? Is this the monster movie category a part of horror?
It can be.
Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
can be.
I don't think the movies you mentioned, though, are really horror. Again, the original Godzilla
King
can
Kong?
be a horror movie.
I mean,
The first King Kong, the original 1933, you could argue is a horror movie.
I'd argue King Kong's a love story, kind of like
Yeah,
Shape of
well, it
Water.
is.
Yeah,
It is. But there is a lot of love stories in horror movies, too.
it's true. There
I
absolutely
mean, look at
is.
Dracula. I mean, for eternity, searching for his love, and he can't find it. It's actually a tragic love story. Dracula and King Kong are both tragic love stories in a way, but there is a horror element to both of them. So
I'm just going to keep going there. The Fly, the Jeff Goldblum.
I could
Yeah.
see that.
That's body horror to
Well,
to
even
a
the
T.
to a degree,
even the
but-
David Hedison 1958 Fly.
Yeah.
Sure, scientists mingling in areas that they shouldn't be. Absolutely.
Yeah, with horrifying results. Look at the Invisible Man. That's another science gone wrong tragedy.
Right.
You could argue if it's a horror movie or not. That's up to whomever's watching it.
I mean, H.G. Wells loved the science gone wrong and
Oh, yeah.
man metal. I mean, look at Dr. Moreau,
All of his novels,
Yeah.
science gone wrong.
which I mean, I guess, I don't know if I'm going to contradict myself with this, but I guess that's where you could tie it back to, say, a Jurassic Park, because Michael Crichton was all about science horror.
Yeah.
Whether it's Jurassic Park or like Westworld.
The only reason I wanted this discussion because I think the more disturbing dramas are horror movies too. Killers of the Flower Moon is just as disturbing as those other movies, probably more so.
I mean, yeah, with that broad outlook of like just because it affected you in that way that it
Well,
scared
it's
you. gave
horrifying.
her-
It's horrifying. The Deer Hunter with the Russian roulette scene.
Deer Hunter,
That's horrifying.
yeah.
That is like horror written all over it. It's just horrifying.
That's, I guess, where I differ on it is because to me, horror is more of a genre. And
Yeah.
because anything. Okay, so say you take a movie and it's either like a hardcore street drama or a horror film, but there's a funny moment in it. It makes you laugh. Is it now a comedy?
Look at Schindler's List. That could be construed as a horror movie too. There's some light moments. When you have a dour movie like Killers of the Flower Moon or Schindler's List, you need to have a little bit of humor in it. But it doesn't make it a comedy.
So that's exactly what I'm saying with a lot of these horror movies.
Now, Shaun of the Dead, you've got horror elements to it, but it's a comedy because it's you're laughing the whole movie.
Well, same thing with like Ghostbusters.
Yeah, those are comedies.
Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty intense moments in Ghostbusters, but it's a comedy.
It's a comedy. It's like with Schindler's List, Killers of the Flower Moon. With Ghostbusters, there's very little disturbing scenes, and it's mainly a comedy.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Whereas Killers of the Flower Moon, Schindler's List, there's more horror in those movies than there is comedy.
I haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon yet.
But Schindler's List, the beginning with a lot of humor about his womanizing. You laugh.
And there's definitely, obviously, especially with that subject matter, definitely horrifying moments and stuff like that. But to me, it's more of a historical drama because this stuff did happen.
Well,
You know what I mean?
it was based on a novel, so
Right.
but it really did happen. But it's still horrifying watching that on screen.
Yeah.
It's disturbing.
Well, I mean, if you want some of the most horrifying things in the world, just open a history book.
Right.
You know, I mean-
That's what I'm saying, though. That's what I'm saying. Stuff that is not classified by the motion picture industry as being horror, to me, is more horrifying than anything labeled as horror. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like Killers of the Flower Moon, if somebody labeled it a horror movie, people would be, ha ha. But if they actually watch it, it's pretty damn disturbing.
Right.
And there's more disturbing, horrific elements that check the horror movie genre checklist than most horror movies themselves. Like, look at Pearl. Did you watch that one?
Yep.
That's more of a melodrama.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a few graphic, violent scenes, but there's nothing scary to me.
No, it's
a melodrama.
Yeah, it's about her. It's about the stuff that's going on in her head.
Yeah, it's a melodrama with a little tiny bit of horror in it.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that is more of like a character study.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But they label it as a horror movie.
Right.
And it's like, just because psychotic, okay, I guess that's what makes it a horror movie. But again, you look, if you're going to use the motion picture industry checklist of what a horror movie is, Schindler's List, Killers of the Flower Moon, The Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now check all those boxes, whereas the ones they deem as horror movies do not check all those boxes. That's just my insight on it.
I mean, yeah, and I can see where you're coming from. Definitely. Again, to me though, it's too broad of an outlook because it's again going back to like, well, I saw sequences that affected me, that terrified me, and stuff like that.
That's the thing. Killers of the Flower Moon is pretty much all 3.5 hours of disturbing images. Right.
I mean, again, not having seen that one, but based on some of the others.
But Schindler's List, most of that movie is disturbing.
I mean, yes, it's disturbing.
It's horrifying.
It's disturbing. It's horrifying. But to me, horror is more of a genre. Like, I mean, even if it doesn't scare you and stuff like that, like, I'm 33 years old. I've been watching Nightmare on Elm Street since I was 10.
That's a comedy.
It's not horrifying to me, but
I know
but it's definitely a horror film.
But the motion picture industry labels it as a horror movie, so we have to accept it as a horror movie. And I guess I'm fine with that. But to me, if I was to label them, I would label Nightmare on Elm Street more of a comedy.
So you're looking at it not so much as like it's the genre that the movie was made in. You're looking at more of a, like, how did it affect me?
Right. Well,
Gotcha.
and that's all of this is how it affects each other. So that we all have our own opinions on it.
And that's what goes back to Adam calling it all subjective.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And it's all subjective. But in my opinion, if we're going by the motion picture industry label of horror movies, those so-called historical drama biopics, again, in my opinion, check the boxes of horror movie more than the so-called horror movies do.
Gotcha.
I'll direct this one at Aaron because I don't know if you've seen it. The original Last House on the Left. The way you think of movies.
I've actually seen the original Last House on the Left.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So you would
not the Wes Craven movie. I've seen the one that it was based on.
Oh,
that's a truly
deep cut.
Well, a lot of cuts, literally, in all those movies.
Not a lot of people know that he based off another movie.
Yeah, right. Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring is actually the true original Last House on the Left.
Yeah,
and I'm a snob. I have not seen it. I'm aware of it. I'm aware it's also graphically violent.
Mm-hmm.
But I seriously doubt it will be as disturbing as Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring.
Okay, fair enough. But
anyway, go ahead.
All right.
You were asking
a horror movie.
Last House on the Left?
Yeah. No.
Even Wes Craven will tell you it's not. I mean, I know, and that goes back to the thing, like a lot of directors won't, Friedkin saying like, Exorcist isn't a horror movie. I mean, I don't know if that's just their way of like kind of shouldering the blame. Like, I didn't want to make a horror movie, so I'm just going to call it not one. But I don't think Last House is a horror movie, no. Yes, disturbing, horrible things happen in it and stuff like that. But I guess, I don't know.
Again, with the way Chris views horror movies, I think you would watch Last House on the Left, say, well, that's terrifying. That's start to finish, basically torturing of two girls. That's a horror movie. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. So you don't think it would be a horror movie?
Definitely a thriller. I'd call it a suspense film. I'd call it a revenge film, especially with the parents at the end. I mean, that takes up most of the movie. Like the stuff that of these people, David Hess, I believe the actor was.
David Hess.
Yep. The stuff that he did to those girls were absolutely terrifying and horrible. But most of the movie is about the parents getting revenge on them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Hills Have Eyes, I would call a horror movie. But yeah, no.
That's borderline for me. The Hills Have Eyes.
Is it?
Yeah.
But yeah, Last House, no. I have a hard time. I guess for me, like a horror movie, you have to have some kind of sense of either like artistic direction or style on it. It doesn't necessarily have to be fantasy, but some kind of out of the norm surrealism to make it a horror film.
So you're both of you guys, it seems like you guys' idea of horror, I'm not knocking you guys. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to knock you. Don't take offense to it. But your guys' idea of a horror film is what the movie industry says is a horror movie.
I mean, I guess to a degree. I mean, if you're putting it that bluntly, I mean,
again, please don't take offense.
No, I don't take offense to that at all.
No, neither do I. I'm trying to just collect my thoughts on that. I mean, I guess so. I guess if we're breaking it down to categories of what the MPAA calls this movie,
exactly.
Where,
and that's why the filmmakers disagree with it so much, is because William Friedkin's like, all right, I'm making a movie about these two people trying to find their faith. Like, you definitely, it's easy to point out watching The Exorcist.
Right.
A priest has lost his faith, and a mom, and the mom, she never had faith, either did their daughter. So they have to find their faith.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, and I know that's what he's trying to do, but it's also a horror movie. and I don't know why there should be this kind of like redheaded stepchild.
Well, I consider The Exorcist a horror movie too. I'm not arguing that. But
but like for somebody like Friedkin to be like, well, that's not what I made. Why?
Again,
just accept it. You made a really good horror movie.
The motion picture industry looks down on horror movies.
Yeah, I know, and I don't understand why.
I don't either. And I hate categorizing movies too, but when I see a movie that checks the motion picture industry's check marks of what is a horror movie, the movies I've brought up over and over again, they have all of those checks.
I mean, if it was good enough for Kubrick, then why wouldn't it be good enough for anyone? He was the first one to tell you that Shining was a ghost movie. It was a ghost story.
That's a horror movie.
Yeah, it's about a man losing his mind, and he had no problem.
He doesn't really explain why he loses his mind. Everyone's like, he goes off like Leonard Maltin. He goes off the rails so fast we don't know. That's the whole idea.
Yeah,
the hotel possessed him, and he became part of the hotel.
Yeah,
that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
It's really a simple horror movie, and that movie is disturbing as hell.
And again, the granddaddy of them all, Hitchcock. He knew what he was making with Psycho.
Yeah,
he knew
that's
exactly
a horror movie.
Exactly, he knew exactly what he was making. So why it's looked down upon, and where somebody has to like Friedkin has to cover his tracks.
Yeah, well, and again, that's why I argue that Scorsese has made a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
A lot of them. A lot of his movies are horrifying to watch.
They're
brutal.
Yeah, that's why I was saying in the beginning, you'll get a lot of film snobs be like, Scorsese would never. Are you kidding me?
To me, if we're using the motion picture industry's definition of horror movies and all of the things it needs to be a horror movie, 9 out of 10 feature films directed by Martin Scorsese have all of those boxes checkmarked.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess whereas I would categorize Shutter Island as a horror movie, maybe not so much Taxi Driver, because there's a lot of disturbing stuff in Taxi Driver.
It's horrifying.
But I would call
it's horrifying.
Yeah, I would call Shutter Island a horror film, but not so much.
Both of them deal with. It's nonstop horror from beginning to end.
Yeah, I know, but
both of them both of them are indeed horror films.
Right.
Again, if we're going by the motion picture industry.
Yeah, I know. I guess for me, from like a filmmaker standpoint, it's like it's not just the story. It's not just the elements that make it. It's the art direction. It's the way the film is shot. It's stuff
the use
like that.
Of red. The use of red in Taxi Driver. That the use of red is used in so many horror movies now. The way that Scorsese uses red, it's like
it's all subjective. Shutter Island definitely. Taxi Driver. I look at Taxi Driver as a street commentary satire kind of thing. Like,
it is, but it also can be a horror movie. It's okay to have a horror satire.
No, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, because that's what, going back to Wes Craven, that's what he was all about.
Well, look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a horror satire. It was the statement about Vietnam.
I was about to say it was about Vietnam.
Yeah, that's a horror satire, and yes, that is a truly disturbing movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it really is. And again, it doesn't show a lot of gore. It's the movies, the horror. A
lot of the good ones don't.
Yeah,
realize.
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I always say the same thing about the original Halloween. There's not a drop of blood in the entire thing.
No. Halloween it didn't scare me as much, but it's a horror movie.
No, Halloween, absolutely.
Well, I mean, John Carpenter set out to make a horror movie. I mean, he was a horror nut growing up.
He knew what he was doing with the horror genre. Scorsese even did this long write-up on how brilliant John Carpenter was at directing horror. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's perfected it. I mean, look how many times he's done it well. Not so much later in his career, but
no. All right, so just let me steer this ship in a slightly different direction. We're talking about what is and what isn't a horror movie. Now I want to ask you guys both, why do you think there's such a stigma in Hollywood about horror movies?
Aaron, you're a filmmaker. I'll let you go first.
Oh gosh,
because again, like we've talked, frequently throughout this conversation, Freakin' saying, no, I never made a horror movie, and everybody kind of shying away from the idea of these movies being quote unquote horror movies. Why do you think there is such a negative stigma of having your film being labeled as a horror movie?
I mean, I guess because, there's a lot of reasons why that. It could be because, you could date it back to the, most original first horror movies and stuff like that. They were regarded, as much as we love Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, like they were B movies. They were the kind of...
I argue that, not Dracula and Frankenstein. They were, they were both made during the Depression, so there wasn't much of a budget to begin with, but... Universal Studios put everything they had backing those movies.
Yeah, but Universal Studios was a B movie studio. Like they weren't making big.
Well, I would argue that Scarface is not a B movie.
Scarface is
okay. It may have been made on a B movie.
I guess that's what I'm saying.
A B movie budget.
Yeah,
but Scarface and Frankenstein rise above B movie material.
Yeah, because they were made so well.
Yeah,
I'll give you that. But I'm talking about like
you're talking about budgets.
I'm talking about budgets, but also like I guess reputation or what was considered. Because
Scarface was a masterpiece.
It was.
Frankenstein was a masterpiece.
It was.
And again, not to cut you off, but another thing I'll argue about Frankenstein and Dracula, there was no horror genre when these movies came out. You had your fright films, but
they didn't call them fright films. They weren't called.
No, they were
movies.
Chaney films.
Yeah,
there
was
Lon
Chaney
movies.
Yeah, Lon Chaney movies.
But at what I'm getting at is,
I want to call
like Frankenstein and Dracula, and what I said in our very first episode, created what we do now know as the American horror genre. Mm-hmm. It launched it.
Right.
So when Frankenstein and Dracula come out, though, there is no horror genre. It hadn't been really explored yet and jumped into yet. So,
what my point is that horror movies aren't necessarily looked upon as like an artistic endeavor.
I can agree with you on that.
Whereas somebody say like when they were making a Frankenstein, whereas like your actors or your directors, they wanted to do these big fantasies or these big musicals that MGM were turning out and stuff like that. That was considered quality. That
prestige.
Was prestige. Thank you. That's the word.
Prestige pictures.
There's no prestige in horror, and I feel like that
there isn't.
That stain hasn't really left it.
Well, the unfortunate thing, it has, but it's been called something else. Again, prestige pictures are like. Oppenheimer is the prestige picture
right
this year.
Yeah.
Even though cut 30, 40 minutes out of that movie. But anyway, yeah, for some reason, there's been like one or two movies that are clearly horror that have kind of, got the prestige treatment, so to speak, but they weren't, it's like Silence of the Lambs, psychological thriller, when it is horror.
Jumping back to John Carpenter's Halloween, like he coveted movies like he loved his B sci-fi movies. He loved his alien invasion movies and stuff like that. He doesn't understand what is wrong with us for loving Halloween. He's like, I made a stupid movie about a guy who escaped from a mental hospital and killed a bunch of kids. Like, the most bare minimum of a story, and you guys, that's all you want me to do.
But look at Psycho, though. Mm-hmm. The difference to me between Psycho and Halloween, they're both slasher movies. So Psycho was technically the first slasher horror movie.
Was that before or after Peeping Tom?
Yeah, Peeping Tom came out about the same. It came out the same year, I think.
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, but Hitchcock, obviously, I mean, I saw Peeping Tom. It doesn't stick out. I love Michael Powell, but when he kind of broke away from Pressburger, it kind of, his movies were a hit or miss, in my opinion. But
right.
Hey, still, a lesser Michael Powell movie is like a great movie for someone else.
Yeah.
You know, Michael Powell is one of the most brilliant filmmakers. Peeping Tom, that I would classify that as a horror movie as well. But when we talk about like Psycho, it's just it was even more shocking. Mm-hmm. It was, to me, more shocking than Peeping Tom.
Sure.
It was more shocking than Halloween.
Yeah.
It really was.
Well, I mean, when you kill your star in the first 15 minutes of the movie,
that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, Carpenter is a great filmmaker, but it's like his stories don't shock like that. They don't have that big twist like Bong Joon-ho did in Parasite. Completely like doing like a holy crap kind of thing. Scorsese does that all the time. Carpenter has never done that. The closest he's come is The Thing. Yeah. These are just my opinions. I'm not saying you guys are wrong.
No.
But again, there's a lot of, to me, horror movies, again, subjective. I think they've been called something else: dramas, psychological thrillers. Mm-hmm. So some of them
psychological thrillers.
Yeah, the only true movie labeled as a horror movie by the motion picture industry that's had any prestige, I guess you can say two: Psycho and The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because the motion picture industry, the Oscars are the highly coveted award. Although most people, you name your favorite movies, most of them are not Best Picture winners.
No, I know. I don't know why we're giving Oscars to movies that people don't even see. But.
Well, that's not always the case. The Sting was a very popular movie.
Oh, I know. It's not always the case.
I know what you're saying
these days.
And The Sting is a great film, but like a movie like The Sting, you know, it's like, oh, that's my favorite movie of all time. Most people don't say that as their favorite movie. It's something else. Like your favorite movie, Adam, I'm going to venture it's Halloween.
My favorite horror movie for sure. Yeah.
So then your favorite movie, let's just talk about like favorite movies. Most of your favorite movies are not Best Picture winners. And that's what the motion picture industry ranks as like, the prestige. Mm-hmm. And again, The Departed is a horrifying film. I would say that's a horror movie, but it's called an action suspense.
Yeah.
But the movie
grimaced at that.
It's a crime drama.
Yeah, it's a crime drama horror movie though. It's so disturbing. It's so horrifying.
Yeah, again,
it really is.
Again, we're gonna just call it all subjective.
Yeah, that's fine. That's why we're in here. We're having a fun, lively debate.
No, absolutely, and
it is a crime drama.
Showgirls is a horror movie, but you couldn't find it in the horror section. It was behind the curtain at the movie store.
Yeah, no, it's in the cult favorite section.
Yeah. It was just horribly bad.
I mean, it was more.
So I guess it's horribly bad. So I guess that's horror. But like you said, Aaron, horrible
things happen, and there's a lot of that in Showgirls.
Horrible execution of that movie. But yeah, again, horror movies. If we're going by the motion picture industry, The Departed checks those lists, but it's not crime drama. Yes, crime drama horror. That's what I think it is.
I mean, going back to Verhoeven with Showgirls, then you'd have to say like RoboCop is a horror movie because the scene where he gets executed is terrifying and it's horrific and graphic.
But I didn't have the same feeling. I did not have the same feeling watching him getting executed as I did when Jack Nicholson just shot a woman in the back of the head. She fell funny. Oh my God, that's disturbing.
No, yeah, you're not wrong.
And Jack Nicholson played the most evil character he's ever played in The Departed.
Yeah, and
he sends chills down your spine. Some of the scenes where he's just randomly lighting a piece of paper on fire. Mm-hmm. And he literally had DiCaprio nervous, like literally shooting that scene.
Yeah.
So to me, I didn't get that feeling with RoboCop. RoboCop's a fun, kick-ass action movie.
Yeah. You see, I have a totally different opinion.
Well, that's what it's all about. We all have opinions. I want to hear them.
Spent a good amount of time in the law enforcement field. when the dude. That's terrifying to me.
He dies and he still has to get up for work.
Yeah.
Still make him go back to work.
Well, I think most my boss would not my immediate boss, but the owner of our company would expect the same thing. But
No, sure.
no, I felt more horrified watching The Departed than I did with RoboCop. I love both of those movies.
No,
I'm not taking anything away from RoboCop. I watched that. I like it.
I'd buy that for $1.
But The Departed to me is just so sinister, evil. Yes, it's a crime drama, just like RoboCop is. Well, RoboCop's more of an action movie.
Yeah, RoboCop's it's a satire.
Yes, satire action.
First
movie.
and foremost, it's definitely sci-fi. I wouldn't call it a horror movie either.
No.
My point being is you're looking at it from a point of view of, okay, this happened and it freaked me out. It's stuck in my head. It's a horror movie.
I'm going by the motion picture industry's checklist of what a horror movie is.
Yeah.
And it checks all those. Mm-hmm. Checks all those boxes.
But again, it goes down to subjective because I could look at The Departed and I can be like, yeah, I mean.
It's most Scorsese fans, they rate The Departed pretty low on the grand scheme of things.
Which I never got.
I know. Again, whatever Scorsese movie I'm watching is my favorite.
Right.
You know, let's take a look at Gangs of New York, though. Bill the Butcher, his sinister stuff, and he's in the movie most 90% of the time, and it's horrifying watching Bill the Butcher, and it sticks in your mind.
Right.
It gets under your skin. It's suspenseful. There's a sense of dread, and that could be a horror movie too. Yes, it's a crime drama, but it's also a horror movie too. What's wrong with a movie being multiple genres?
Nothing. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I think most of Scorsese movies are horrifying. A lot of them are because he's afraid of violence, and it shows. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're so brutal, and that's why they're so disturbing, and they stick in your mind. Like you watch, most horror movies, people laugh at some of the violence. People aren't laughing at a Scorsese movie when there's violence. It's very disturbing. Very shocking, brutal, horrifying, disturbing.
Now I'm just getting goofy, and I'm like, what can be considered a horror? Titanic, the last, boat sinking. I mean, how dreadful and terrifying is that?
How dreadful and terrifying is the script?
I mean,
this is bad. I can't believe that.
All right, here's another good one: the Terminator.
That could be considered a horror movie, but it's all about execution of it in a way, because you look at Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, you look at Psycho, you look at The Exorcist, all the ones that are classified mainly as horror movies. It doesn't horrify like that, though, in my opinion.
I got one. Alien, the first Alien.
That could be considered a horror movie. I would say that's a sci-fi horror. Because a lot of disturbing things happen in that movie. This guy's not really a human. That sticks in my mind all the time. It's like, from time to time, it's like, oh crap, that scene. It's like.
I mean, I would absolutely categorize that as a horror movie.
Yeah, it's a sci-fi horror.
Yeah. I guess I would put Terminator under the same category.
I see it. That's more of a sci-fi action. I don't see that as a horror movie. Again, it just.
I mean, it kind of
Alien. You want to instead of taking good look at Scorsese films versus Alien, let's take a look at Alien versus Terminator. The stuff that goes on in Alien is way more disturbing than Terminator. Terminator, it just doesn't have the oomph that the first Alien did.
Yeah, but a lot of the same beats, we were just talking a lot about Halloween, a lot of the same beats are in Terminator. It just so happens that the stalker killer is a robot.
Yeah,
from the future. Yes, yeah. There's more sci-fi elements to it, but it's still a story about a. But
like Halloween didn't really scare me either. Terminator didn't. Alien, had a lot of stuff in there that sticks with you.
Well, okay, so now we're breaking down some walls here. You're saying that you think that Halloween is a horror movie, but it didn't scare you.
It didn't scare me, but I could see how that is a horror movie, though.
I mean, yeah, but if what you're going by is that all these Scorsese movies really disturbed you and stuck with you and stuff like that,
this is all
and
subjective.
those are horror movies, but you got something like Halloween that is deliberately a horror movie, but it didn't scare you. But wouldn't, by your logic, you'd be like, well, it's not a horror movie. It didn't get under my skin.
Yeah, well, it does a little bit, though. I mean, Halloween doesn't get under my skin quite as much as the movies I mentioned. It still does. I mean, how can it not? A little bit. It just didn't like. I'm not like scared. You know. And you know what I mean? Maybe I'm not explaining myself well. Maybe that's what it is. No, but Halloween, I do see as a horror movie, but the Terminator didn't get under my skin like how. I guess if we're going to compare Halloween to the Terminator, yes, there are a lot of similarities, but. To me, it's like action, adrenaline, action.
And for the record, I would consider Terminator more of a sci-fi action movie.
See, I consider Halloween a horror movie.
Right.
I've never said it wasn't. The Terminator, it just doesn't have the way it's executed. Doesn't get under my skin quite like Mike Myers, because it's a robot. Yeah. Its mission. Halloween. Mike Myers, you don't know what the guy's thinking. That's what makes that's
what's
the only
scary about it.
Well, I wasn't afraid, but it got under my skin. It's like, what the hell is this guy thinking? We don't want to know what he thinks, and that's what John Carpenter's like. We don't want to know what his background is. We don't want to know what he's thinking. And to me, that's what separates the two. The Terminator, you know exactly what he's going to do. He's programmed that way. He's set to kill John Connor. Okay. Yes, I guess that's a little horrifying, but as an audience member, you already know, so it doesn't make it as horrifying.
And again, that just, you asked me what's my favorite horror movie, and why I pick Halloween is because you never know where Michael Myers is. You don't know if he's in the closet,
the best part about the
next
movie.
room, if he's in the backyard. Yeah, it's where the hell is he?
And the most startling part about Halloween, the part that is the only part that sent chills down my spine. He literally falls to his death, supposedly out the window, and he's not there. It's like, what the heck? That's the part. It's like, then that at the end. Yep. It's like, you couldn't have ended a movie more perfectly than that. A horror movie like that's like, holy crap, this guy is like unstoppable.
Yeah, and then you get the house shots, with his breathing to be like, he still might be there.
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's the unknown that makes it a horror movie. Now, if we knew his motives, like Rob Zombie spelled out all the motives like that, okay, it's not a horror movie anymore. Mm-hmm. But what made it
Rob Zombie's Halloween isn't a horror movie.
Well, it's a B movie horror movie.
But I guess that's the point where I'm.
Yeah, well,
I'm hitting with it.
I was kind of joking because Rob Zombie. I do actually like the Rob Zombie Halloween, and that is a horror movie too. But it's more. A lot of the mystery is taken away from Mike Myers, which makes it really not horrifying at all. Mm-hmm. Even though there's like gore upon gore upon gore. Again, to me, it's not shocking at all, though.
Right.
So let's see how many brutal kills we can get and how much blood can be splattered.
Do the exact opposite of John Carpenter.
Right.
He showed you nothing. We're going to show you everything.
I enjoyed it on an entertainment level, but I guess you could call. If you want to call Rob Zombie's Halloween a horror movie, go ahead, but I didn't see it as a horror movie.
So okay. So now so this is where we're landing. Is a horror movie to you is subjective. It's about what you thought scared you.
Yeah, and that's
stuff like that.
And again, you guys have different mindsets, and that's fine.
No, absolutely fine, because that can mean a lot. To a lot of different people. You were just explaining how. What makes Halloween so scary is because you don't know.
Right.
Versus Terminator, well, you know what his objective is and stuff like that. But somebody can look at Terminator and be like, that's terrifying. He's going through the phone book.
Yeah.
He's killing every Sarah Connor he knows. Yeah. He, Kyle Reese's speech about like he won't stop, he won't sleep, he won't do anything until that could be terrifying to somebody.
But it can't. But we already know. So I think that's what makes a horror movie so good, is if you don't know all the motives behind it.
Well, it wasn't that also like what Alfred Hitchcock was talking about, like his theory behind suspense and stuff like that. Tell the audience what you're supposed to be afraid of. You know,
Alfred Hitchcock did it. He executed it. I mean, James Cameron. He as a technical director, he's brilliant. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to like storytelling, I think
he kind of tells the same story over and over.
Right. And I mean,
different settings.
You can never say James Cameron movies aren't technically amazing, because all of them are.
Yeah,
every single one of them, even though they're tedious and sometimes boring. But anyway. Yeah, that's Alfred Hitchcock. He knew his audience well, and he knew how to shock the hell out of them.
Yeah, I mean, because again, I'm paraphrasing because I don't know his exact quote, but his thing was like, okay, there's a bomb under the table. Don't hide that from the audience. Tell them there's a bomb about to go off in 3 minutes, and watch the horror evolve.
Yeah, and James Cameron did not do that with Terminator.
I mean.
He didn't do it. He did it, but he didn't do it in the way it was presented. It didn't shock really anybody. Mm-hmm. I wasn't shocked. I had a good time. Mm-hmm. I was entertained.
Yeah, but we're also comparing James Cameron to Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah, no.
I mean, like,
but we were comparing, and rightfully so. You can compare
the theory,
John Carpenter's theory of horror versus. I mean, James Cameron obviously wasn't making a horror movie because there was nothing shocking about any of the motives, because you already knew it. The way it was presented, here it is. When Alfred Hitchcock presents something, it's like, here it is. And it's like, okay, yeah, with Hitchcock, yeah, we know. And then, oh my God, you're still like, it's just the way he shoots the story, the way he presents it. You know, it's like most of his stuff is based on books,
right?
But they're nothing like the books. Just like Kubrick, nothing like the books. Mm-mm. Even when he had Arthur C. Clarke helping him out with 2001.
Yeah, I know.
And that's just I guess we can say it's all about the brilliance of the filmmakers too, because.
Well, I mean, Kubrick had the hubris to be like, I can make this better,
right?
You know.
Well, Scorsese.
That's why King hated him.
Yeah, and Stephen King's. I've only liked one of his books.
Really,
The Stand.
The Stand.
That's the only book of his that I really thoroughly enjoyed. Most of it, believe it or not, it's his longest book, but most of the other books I think are just long and tedious.
I mean, I enjoy a lot of his books, but The Shining was not one of them.
No, that was like his first or second book.
It was his second. His first was Carrie, which I liked Carrie.
I like the way what Brian De Palma did with Carrie better.
See, that one I disagree with a little bit.
That's
I mean,
okay.
I love the De Palma movie. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and there's another one for this topic. Is that a horror movie?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because nothing really happens until the end.
There's a lot of horrifying things bubbling beneath the surface.
Okay.
In that one.
And yes, I do think it's a horror movie as well. It was a test for you guys.
A test.
Yeah.
I'm glad we passed the test. Aaron's test.
But The Shining, in terms of the book, is one of the most boring things I've ever read in my life.
It was so convoluted. The ending gets wrapped up so nicely. But anyways, we got to stay focused on what is a horror movie, what is not a horror movie. And it's subjective. I know all of this was, but it was good to like delve into this conversation. Any final thoughts, guys?
On the top, you know what? If you think it's a horror movie, good for you. Good for you.
I mean, yeah, I actually, outside of the fun of debating it, because I just like to debate and stuff like that, I ultimately agree. Yeah, all art is subjective,
right?
You know what I mean? And yes, horror is an art.
It is art, and that's one thing I wish Hollywood would like wake up and realize. It is art,
exactly, and that's where I was going with the conversation earlier. Why does horror get such a negative stigma attached to it? I mean, again, granted, there's for one Exorcist, there's 10,000 Halloween Ends.
Well,
but
I know
still,
Roger Ebert said this years ago. I have the Sergio Leone anthology, and he wrote about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he literally he didn't apologize for it, but at least he kind of corrected himself. He goes, I was describing what he labeled as a 4-star movie, but I only gave it 3 stars because maybe I didn't think spaghetti westerns were art.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, one can argue, okay, there's spaghetti westerns, and then there's Leone's movies, which we'll get into a conversation about some other time.
This has been a long conversation, but before we wrap, let's give our guest, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aaron Lambert. And,
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, when your film is ready, we'll have you back in again to dissect your film.
Absolutely. Would love that.
Is there anything you want to throw out about your movie before we call it a day on this episode?
I'll throw it out there. It's a Batman film. It's it's not an unsanctioned one, so we don't have any backing from like Warner Brothers or DC like that. So I guess you'd categorize it as a fan film, but
a B movie Batman.
Believe me, and the budget represents that. What's interesting about this film is that yes, it's a Batman film, but it's also more of a mental health film. It's about mental health awareness. We have several mental health groups that actually did back us and stuff like that. And
awesome.
The producer Todd Teal, he's the one been spearheading. It's his project that he hired us to do, and we finished shooting and we're in post production now. So
cool.
Early 2024 is when you'll see it.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to talk about it. Again, Scared for Reels. I'm Chris O'Neill.
Adam Perry.
Thank you very much. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, and look for us on YouTube, SoundCloud. Comment. Tell us what a horror movie is in your opinion. I know a lot of people thought I went way out in left field with some of my options, but I want to know what you think a horror movie is. I'm sure Adam does too. Just comment, tell us, shoot us a message on our social medias. Thank you.
We'll see you next time on Scared for Reels.